Yes, guys, you know what time it is. It's your boy Jack here at the Irish Hotspur, and here's my sort of short take on why I think Lucas Moura has been kept around this summer. It's good to be back, people, on the channel. I'm going to be coming out with plenty of these sort of short takes this week, so everybody do smash that like button, and also as well, feel free to give me your answers as well as your theories as to why you think Lucas Moura has been kept around this summer. Because I feel like considering players like Winks, Regulon, whatnot that have been, shown the door, it is quite interesting why Lucas Moura has been kept around. And these are kind of my theories as to why he's been kept around. So let's get into it. My first one, which is, I think, quite an obvious one, is that he is, positionally versatile, something that Conte probably values quite highly. He can play as a right wing, left wing, can play as a cam through the middle as he's done under Jose in the past. He can play as a right wing back as we're starting to see in the preseason, and he could be even kind of a late minute sort of substitution as a right wing back, as we'll get into later. It's probably something that Conte kind of values quite a lot. Somebody that can bring that sort of ability or that sort of kind of energy in a variety of positions. And there's always a spot for somebody, I think, in that sort of squad, as well as I think he is good at taking it past his man in any of those positions that I just mentioned. He is it's probably his best attribute. Lucas Moura is taking it past his man in the one-on-one sort of situations. This will come in handy, I think, in sort of those last minute sort of substitutions. With the 5 substitutions we do have in place now, Lucas Moura can cause a bit of chaos in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever amount of time you give him. He can come on with that bravery and that energy that you do need to make something happen. And I feel like he could do that in a variety of positions. It doesn't need to be right wing or left wing. I think he can do that as a cam, and he can do that as a right wing back, and even maybe do that playing as a second striker if we're that desperate, considering injuries. But something that does need to be considered. I think he's a great last minute option, as I'm kind of continuing to say here. But what I do mean by that is that he brings that sort of dynamism. He brings that sort of progressive play. He's not a guy that likes to play backwards. I think Lucas Moura, he picks up the ball and he drives at his defenders and does it with free will. He doesn't really care who it is coming up against him. It could be Van Dijk, it could be, the worst defender in the world. He just looks at them as a face and a number. I don't think he really cares. He just wants to take it past his man, almost a bit Saint Maximin, kind of esque, if you ask me. And it's something that does really come in handy when you are kind of desperate for something to happen and you do need something to happen. Lucas Moura is a perfect player to, to bring that sort of kind of edge, that sort of X factor, when you're looking for kind of kitchen sink time, if you ask me. And he can be a player just to just make something happen out of nothing is really the point I'm trying to say. And when you are in that situation, that's a good last minute option. Another point is that he is an excellent ambassador of the club, especially for Brazilian players coming in the case of Emerson, Richarlison, Carlos Vinicius, in the past. Obviously, he speaks English very well and has been living in London for some time. So he can help them settle into England. But as well, he is, a huge ambassador of the club with this sort of attitude and his sort of, the way that he plays. I think that it has been a good influence on the likes of Richarlison. It's been a good influence on the likes of Emerson. Even Carlos Vinicius, worked really hard when he came onto the pitch. And maybe that's just them all being, very hard workers and very, determined players on the pitch, and, maybe having good attitudes, at least on the pitch, but also could be, the influence that I think Lucas Moura has on those sort of players. Lucas Moura has never been known as being, kind of a lazy guy on the training ground or a lazy guy on the football pitch. He's somebody that does give his all for the football club, and somebody that does, show his best effort and doesn't really care, he's coming up against. He doesn't seem to be too intimidated. He might not be the most talented or most skilled player on the pitch, but he's not really ever too intimidated, I think, by the occasion. And I think that has shown in plenty of moments. And he's also scored one of the most iconic goals, for Spurs in recent memory. And that could also be, something for new Brazilian players to see as to maybe what they could sort of achieve. At Spurs, they've seen what Lucas has done, as a squad role type player. And, he scored one of Spurs' most iconic goals, despite being maybe more of a squad role type player. And he also does come from, I think, a very humble background. I think he has, maybe some good, sort of personality traits that come with that. I think coming, I believe, from Sao Paulo as well. A lot of Brazilian players come from Sao Paulo. He could maybe, be that sort of, friendly, kind of a person in the squad, for any, again, Brazilian players that might need some help, settling into London, if you ask me. He actually cares about this football club. And I think that's a huge point, about Lucas and why, again, he's probably kept at Spurs, he's Spurs through and through. Coys, as they like to say. There's always a spot for someone who cares deeply about the club and gives their ultimate effort, if you ask me. And again, it just goes a long way, I think, when it comes to, managers like Conte. He wants to have players that want to play for this football club and want to give their ultimate effort when they're on the football pitch, no matter how many, minutes they are given. And I think Lucas is a perfect example of that. He has been one of our best players as well in the worst of times. Maybe a good example would be, at the end of the Mourinho era, the Ryan Mason, kind of final against Man City as well. During those Nuno Espirito Santo days, he was pretty great and, was probably one of the best players when everyone else was playing really poorly or when everyone else just wasn't really up for it, or really showing the effort that we were expecting as a bare minimum of Spurs fans. Often Lucas felt like, he shined through when we were in those tough situations against because of our manager or because of our opponent, and we just weren't playing well. Lucas was one of our best players, I felt like, in my eyes. And, it wasn't like, he's playing sensationally, but he was the player that we looked at, as being the shining light, or someone that, at least embodied, the efforts that we expect, from players that are wearing, this beautiful badge. And something I did really admire, about Lucas was he was one of our better players during kind of the worst of, performances, the worst of times, you could say, as a Spurs fan. And that just goes a long way for me. And I think it, probably, is an indictment of, how, or maybe, just a good example of how, much he cares about this football club, is how good of performances he's put when times have been tough here. As well, maybe just kind of quickly, he doesn't really have a lot of sell-on value, if you ask me. Steven Bergwijn earned us around 30 million. You saw how much, sell-on value he had, despite not even wanting to play for this football club. He still got us around 30 million. Lucas does want to play for this football club. He loves playing for Spurs. He also is more of a beneficial, I think, late, option. As I've said before, he can play a variety of positions. He comes on with that energy. Doesn't really have a bad attitude in the squad or anything like maybe Steven Bergwijn did. His age doesn't exactly benefit, his sell-on value either. And if he were to go anywhere, he'd probably go back to, to Brazil. I think he said he didn't really want to play for another European club other than Spurs. And if he were to, move on from Spurs, he would just go back to Brazil. And I don't really know too many Brazilian clubs that would pay really more than like 10 million for him. So if anything, I think he'd go for around 10 million if he were to go to another European club. If he were to go back to Brazil, probably only be paying like 4 or 5 million, I think, for the likes of Lucas. So I think we're just gonna have to accept that Lucas is Spurs through and through. He might be here for maybe a year or two, and he's someone that has shown this football club a lot of faith, a lot of passion, and I'm actually happy that he is sticking around now that I've kind of, explained it out in this sort of way as to all the reasons why I think at least Spurs and Conte have kept him around. But everybody, do let me know what you think of this. Feel free to smash that like button on your way as well. Feel free to hit that super thanks if you want to support the channel. But everybody, as always, come on, you Spurs. In Conte we trust, and I will be seeing you.